Hey everyone, welcome back. It is Sunday, March the 12th, and just wanted to do a quick video on something I think is very funny, and that is that I was reading something yesterday where CNN had been doing some internal polling and investigation into their fake news propaganda plan. If you remember, it was actually CNN that started this fake news thing to discredit mainly the independent media and their competitors, I assume, and probably including Fox. But it appears that CNN has just learned that it has backfired on them. It boomeranged, and now they are the ones who are having to defend themselves and are now most associated with being fake news. So their plan failed. It blew up in their face. And I watch a lot of CNN. I hate them, but I watch them because I like to comment on the crazy things that they say. And so I do have to watch, unfortunately, a lot of media I don't like in order to do this. I have to watch MSNBC and CNN, and I have to read stuff from the Washington Times, the Washington Post. I have to, unfortunately, engage in this so that when I do videos for you, I can give both sides of an issue, or I can understand better how to make an argument based on what the opposition or the adversary has been up to. And so I watch CNN a lot and MSNBC for this purpose, and you can really see they've really been fighting back against this fake news thing. And you can see that I'm not really sure, I'm not really convinced yet whether they actually believe their own BS or whether they know better and they're just playing the game. I really don't know at this point. I just don't know. It really probably doesn't even matter. But you see them, particularly this Cuomo guy, who I think he's either CNN or MSNBC. But it doesn't really matter, any of them. Maddow, Chris Hayes, it doesn't really matter. They all like to defend themselves as journalists. They like to say, hey, we're the news. Everything else is propaganda. But, so I wanted to take just a moment here and make this very, very simple to understand. This is not hard, as everyone wants to try to decide who's fake news, who's not fake news, who's telling this and that and the other thing. But this is very simple to break down. It's not a difficult concept to understand. I mean, you're really looking at two things. Are you a journalist or are you an advocate? You cannot be both. And are you a news network or are you a propaganda network? So let's look at these two comparisons, and it's very easy to see when you look at these two comparisons exactly where you should fall in between news and propaganda. Okay, so for those of you on MSNBC and CNN who claim to be journalists, here's the litmus test for a journalist. If you are an advocate, if you are advocating a particular position, if you are addressing a certain issue with a particular spin or bias to your own personal views or those views of someone who you represent, then you are an advocate. You cannot be an advocate and a journalist. You can either be one of the two. A journalist is someone who tells us a story. They give us the facts. They tell us who, what, when, where, how, and why. They answer those questions. If there's more than two sides to the story, we get the two sides or more sides to the story. And it's given to us without bias. Journalists are supposed to put their blinders on, and they're not supposed to inject their own political views. A really, really good journalist, here's how you tell a really good journalist. Watch that journalist for some time and try to figure out if you can determine his political persuasion. If you can watch this person and you can't tell whether they're Republican, Democrat, liberal, conservative, whatever, if you can't tell what these people's political leanings are by watching them, then you're probably looking at an actual journalist. If you can turn them on and watch them and in 15, 20 minutes or less determine whether or not they are conservative, liberal, what have you, then you probably are looking at an advocate, not a journalist. Let me give you an example. When I was a kid and even a young man, my favorite news program to watch was the Sunday morning show This Week with David Brinkley. Now, he had two libs on there, regular libs who are on every Sunday with him, Sam Donaldson and Cokie Roberts. Very, very obvious to see that Sam and Cokie were hardcore left-wing liberals, both of them. It was easy to see. You didn't have to watch even one segment of that show for even 5 minutes to figure that one out. And George Will was the token conservative. I don't consider George Will to be a conservative. He's an establishment Republican. I don't think there's much conservative, although in the world of mainstream media, he passes off as a conservative, just like, you know, what's his name, Brooks from the New York Times or whatever, who you see on PBS all the time. He's also a standard run-of-the-mill corporate Republican. He's not a conservative, but he gets to play the role of one on their program. Oh, so that's really what I would do is I would get up on these Sunday mornings, and I did this for 15 years. I would always watch, you know, David Brinkley. And to tell you the truth, I could never tell, even to this day, I could not tell you after watching show after show after show what David Brinkley was. Now, I assume he was a liberal or a Democrat because he was in Washington, spent his whole life in Washington, what came out of the corporate media. He was a newsman for many years, just a hard newsman delivering the news for many years on ABC. Then he got his Sunday morning program, which you would expect maybe that he would espouse his views a little more, but I could never tell with Brinkley. You could never tell. He was right down the middle. You know, he would never side with one or the other. He would interview people. He wouldn't beat people up. He was a really good interviewer. He wouldn't beat them up. He would ask them important questions or whatever. He was a really good journalist. I really liked David Brinkley. And he may have been a hardcore lefty. I don't know. But I was never able to tell what his political affiliation was. And so therefore, I have come to determine that David Brinkley was an actual journalist, a real professional, a real newsman, because I could never tell where he stood. And so I credit him as being a great journalist and a professional journalist and an example of what a journalist really is. Again, go over to CNN, MSNBC, or Fox, or any of these news networks. It's so easy to tell what their political persuasion is. And if they are injecting their own personal biases into what they're saying, they are not journalists. They are advocates. You can't be both. Okay? Now, let's look at news or propaganda, which is where we come down with the fake news. What is the difference between news and propaganda? Well, if you look at news, again, is just you tell someone, you don't even, not like a journalist would tell a story to reveal something. A newsman doesn't go quite that far. You think about the newsman, he's just the guy who basically reads the headlines to you. And they don't go into a lot of detail, and they don't try to break any great story, because that's more for the journalist to do. So it would be a separate segment. I kind of see the news as what you get on your local news, or if you watch the evening news. They just tell you the facts of what events happened that particular day. What happened, where, how, why, who, whatever. And so it's just reporting the facts. It's just simply reporting facts without any opinion on the facts. Just here's what happened. Here's where it happened. Here's why they think it happened. Here's who it happened to, or who it happened to because of this particular person. So it's just the facts. Now, what is propaganda? Let me turn to my little dictionary here. What does it say? Propaganda, information that is designed to mislead or persuade. Mislead or persuade. So when you look across the media networks, whether it be Fox or CNN or MSNBC, does it appear to you like they're just reporting facts or just telling you a story? Or does it appear that they're trying to persuade you into a particular point of view? Persuade you so that the way that they bring the information to you, it causes you to see things in a certain way. Because of the way that they delivered the information to you, with a particular spin or bias on it. That would be propaganda. And I would suggest to you that if you watch Fox or CNN or MSNBC or even ABC, even the network news, they try a little harder to pass themselves off as news people. But all in all, when you look at it, especially the cable networks and stuff like that, and a lot of the stuff on the internet, certainly, you could even call what I do propaganda. That's fine. I'm not telling you I'm a newsman. And of course, I am a libertarian. I am a constitutionalist. So therefore, I guess you could say I have some bias. But if you ask anybody who knows me, they'll tell you I was the very first one to call out George Bush. I'm the very first one to call out Republicans and so-called conservatives. I'm actually harder on conservatives and so-called Republicans and all these people. I'm actually harder on them than I am even on the liberal media. Okay, because that's the party. I'm not a Republican. I'm a libertarian, but obviously I end up voting mostly for people that would be running on a Republican ticket. I voted for Donald Trump. I didn't vote for Gary Johnson. I don't think Gary Johnson's much of a libertarian. He doesn't meet my standard of a libertarian. So I voted for Donald Trump. I think he had actually more libertarian ideas than Gary Johnson did. So this is really what it all comes down to. Is it, are you a journalist or are you an advocate? And that's the question that you have to ask. And if you're watching a news program, you have to ask yourself, are they giving me news or are they giving me propaganda? The idea should be that if you're really a pure journalist and you're really delivering the news, you should not want the way that you present that information to cause any bias to the people who are listening to you. What you need to do, if you really want to address yourself as a journalist, consider yourself a journalist or a news person, what you really need to be able to do is to put the information out there without any bias, so that the listener or the viewer can get the information and then they can decide on what they think about it. See, the media isn't supposed to be telling us what we should think about the facts, so-called facts, that they are reporting. They shouldn't be telling us what to think about it. They should only be giving us the basic information we need to know what's happening with that particular news information. How we feel about it should be up to us. But as we can see, this is a lost art. It doesn't really exist anymore. You'd be hard-pressed to find any real journalism because, again, if you look at these people, and again, I say the same for Fox, they are advocates. Sean Hannity is an advocate, and I think he would tell you that. I think most of the people on Fox would tell you that they are advocates for the Republicans or the conservatives. And the people on CNN and MSNBC, they simply won't admit that. No, they simply won't admit that. They want you to believe that they're giving you an unbiased view. But again, it's obvious to everyone, apparently everyone except for these people at MSNBC and CNN and New York Times and all these people, unless they think we're all completely stupid and not capable of understanding the difference between a journalist and an advocate. And so that's really how you evaluate when everybody's talking about, well, who's fake news, who is fake news, who is not fake news. It really doesn't have anything to do with what side you come from, the left or the right. That's not how you answer that question. You answer that question by asking the two questions I asked at the beginning of this video. Is this person bringing me this information? Are they bringing it to me as a journalist or an advocate? Are they trying to persuade me as to what I should think about the information they are giving me? That's the question you ask. And when you're watching these programs, you say, well, is this news or propaganda? Well, if they're just giving you the facts of some event that went down, and if they choose to go a little farther than that and give some opinion about it based on, and it should not be their opinion, it should be the opinion of maybe witnesses or experts that you call in. What you need to do is make sure that you represent both or all sides so that it's fair. You can't just do the story, bring in someone who's supposedly an expert, and then have them come in and give you an opinion of theirs without giving someone on the other side of the issue a fair chance to contradict what they said. So typically news really shouldn't get into that. That would be more what you'd see on cable or something like that. You really shouldn't see that on your evening news. You shouldn't see that on your local news. They should just tell you what happened, where it happened, when it happened, how it happened, or what have you. Just the facts. And so this to me is the easy way to break down whether or not you're watching fake news and actually defining what is fake news. And there's one other thing I want to mention. All these networks do this, and it's I think the FCC needs to take a serious look at all this, because it's really starting to be important. And a lot of times what they don't tell you on these news programs, whether it's CNN or MSNBC or Fox or whoever, what they don't tell you is when they bring these people on their show who are supposedly experts, these people are generally paid to be on these programs. They are advocates for someone else, maybe a chemical company, a pharmaceutical company, the military-industrial complex, the intelligence agencies, some think tanks. These people are advocates who they have coming on, and the reason they bring them on is to make you think that they're bringing on some unbiased person who has all this credibility, an expert, and he's going to come and give you his expert opinion, his unbiased expert opinion. But this individual 99% of the time is not unbiased, and he may not even be an expert. He is someone who is part of an establishment. His job is to come on and persuade you to a particular point of view. And a lot of times they won't have an opposing point of view. Or if they do, it's a false opposing point of view. So this is the games that are played. And I think personally, I believe that the FCC should make a rule that any time that anyone is being paid or compensated in any way to come onto a news program and give an opinion about some issue or something that's going on, that they should have to actually do a disclaimer. They should actually have to run something across the bottom of the screen. They should have to tell you if this person represents any organization that might benefit from the view that they're giving, and certainly if they're being paid to be there. That should all be told to people. Most of us know that, but there are people who don't. And so it's to me it's like truth in advertising, you know. So I think that there are some things that the FCC can do and that they need to look at. And it is a serious issue. Are we watching fake news, or are we watching propaganda, or are we watching people like that? So I think we do need to understand it better. I think that we do need to have a standard, and I think I just laid out the standard, what it is. Are you a journalist, or are you an advocate? CNN. Are you news, or are you propaganda? MSNBC, New York Times, Washington Post, and all the rest. Those are the questions you should be asking yourself. And when you do ask yourself those questions, then you should understand why your fake news propaganda campaign backfired, why it boomeranged on you, and why people regard you now as the fake news.